to Redefine The Circle, a podcast where we discuss all things pitching. I'm Ashley Sunshine, co-owner and head of pitching development at S2 Breakthrough. In this podcast, we're going to highlight topics that focus on how to maximize your pitchers now. We're going to discuss some of the trends that we've seen at S2 Breakthrough and talk about how we use data to create systems and training approaches that are specific to each pitcher. It's so important for us to continue to share this information and facilitate discussion within the pitching community so we can keep evolving as coaches and ultimately grow pitching into something it's never been before. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for joining the quest to redefine the circle. This podcast is sponsored by YakkerTech, softball's first in-game optical tracking system and most accurate data capturing solution. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 1 of Redefine the Circle podcast. I'm Ashley Sunshine, co-owner of S2 Breakthrough and head of pitching development. I'm so excited to finally kick off this podcast. Today's topic is going to be, in my mind, really a foundational topic, a super important one. We're going to talk about pitch labels and pitch types, how we typically are teaching or assigning pitchers to have different types of pitches, what's sort of traditional in the world of softball, why at S2 Breakthrough we really have found that it's the traditional way really is not the best approach and why we do things differently. So let's get started. Let's first talk about what this traditional way of teaching pitches really looks like, what it looks like. We typically see that a pitcher comes in for, meets her pitching coach. And what happens is, Sally, the pitcher, first is taught how to throw a fastball. And we tell Sally, hey, this is going to be your pitch that you're going to throw as hard as possible. It's not going to be a movement pitch. You're going to throw it to locations. You're going to hit your spots. Once then you develop your fastball, then we learn changeup. So now you have some off speed. And then from there, we're going to learn how to move the ball. We're going to learn to break the ball. So we're going to first learn drop ball because that drop ball is most effective or the drop ball is easiest to learn. There's a variety of reasons. I think that that we typically give pitchers as far as why we teach certain pitches first. Then we might say next is screwball, then it's curveball, then it's rise ball, and on we go. And really, the order, the number of pitches that are taught, the order of pitches that really, the order in which they go in seems to become like, an identity to that pitching coach. So if you go to Sally down the street or you go to, I keep using Sally, that was the pitcher I already used. So if you go to Jenny down the street as the pitching coach, and it might be like, okay, when you go to Jenny, she teaches you 7 different pitches by the time she's 14 and people are judging that or, maybe some people think it's great. Whereas Fred down the other side of the street, he doesn't let any of his pitchers create break on the ball until they're 15, 16. And again, it's sort of, some people think that's great and some people don't. I think it's really important for us to start to talk about why neither of those approaches really are working for our athletes. So first and foremost, let's talk about some of the information that we really have seen here at S2 Breakthrough, the data that we've collected. Any of our athletes that come and train with us, whether they are remote or whether they are here in-house, they start with our assessment. And so what we've seen as we've started this assessment process with a lot of athletes is a very common theme that regardless of how many pitches that pitchers tell us they have, what often happens is when we measure them on Rapsodo, what we end up seeing is a lot of similarity. So I should say maybe they have 5-6 pitches, and most of those pitches, if not all of them, have the exact same spin profile. Essentially, they're not creating different pitches. They're calling things different pitch labels and then just angling the same pitch in a different direction. Or sometimes maybe we see a pitcher has, they have 6 pitches and they all have a tremendous amount of sink. So it's not that they're just, shoving or bulleting different pitches in different directions. They actually have a pretty good drop ball, but that same spin exists for every single pitch. So I want to share a little bit of, what that looks like when we are assessing that and when we have athletes that come in and we pull that dashboard or that pitch profile together. This is really what we're typically looking at. It looks a lot like this where we kind of zoom in and you zoom in and you can see that this pitcher in particular, everything had top spin really nothing had a significant amount. Maybe that drop ball's pushing a little bit of 6 inches, so we're getting there. But for the most part, everything really looks the same, but there's tons and tons of pitch types. I can't tell you enough how often this happens. And really, when we look at the data across the nation, this is what we see, that pitchers are, they have a lot of pitch labels, but the ones that really actually create some variability in those labels, they stand out. And so I really feel like that's not because our pitchers aren't able to do this. I think that the approach is wrong. And that is really where I started to dig into things and think like, okay, what's going on here? Why does it seem like most of our pitchers have all these pitch labels, but nothing's really going on? Nothing really is, none of those pitch labels are actually differentiating from one another. So what we really started to do at S2 was first and foremost started to question, why do we always say, now that we have Rapsodo, we have, we're getting this ball flight info all the time, why do we say that the fastball is a pitch that, it doesn't break, it just goes to location? What we really have found here at S2 is that just depends on the pitcher. So we have some pitchers where that's absolutely true. It's mostly a bullet spin pitch. It is their fastest pitch. And really it's the pitch that they're just trying to locate and put where they want. And others where their fastball just naturally has spin direction. Sometimes that's consistent, and sometimes that spin direction varies. So here's an example of what I mean. For those of you that are able to watch this and watch the video clip, you'll see this visual. But you'll see here, this is an athlete whose fastball, over the course of, a day or two, we had her throw a handful, and you can see it's pretty split in half, like 50-50. When we look at her ball flight data, half of those fastballs are spinning with backspin and half of them have topspin. Really what that tells me is like, okay, this kid's arm action right out of the gates, it has variability. It has she has the opportunity to really create a lot of different spin directions. I see that in her neutral, in her fastball. When I'm not asking her to create any break, I just want to see how the arm unravels. Pretty similarly, I'm going to kind of scroll through here. Again, if you're just listening to this, highly encourage you to check it out on YouTube. Check this video out so you can see these visuals as well. But if not, I'll try to explain them pretty in great detail. So this is another pitcher. She only threw maybe little less than 10 pitches here. And you can even see about, 5 or 6 of them have topspin, and then 2 of them popped backspin. This is going to tell me, okay, I'm going to look a little deeper. I think this athlete is showing me that she has the ability to do something here in her neutral. So instead of thinking about, okay, fastball is it's the same for everyone, it's your hardest pitch, just goes to location. The first thing that we need to do differently is start to look at, we need to measure, what do athletes do with their fastballs? What is their neutral? What does their body sort of naturally fall into? I'm just going to give one more example here as I scroll through. This is a picture where you can see it's not this case of like variability where sort of half were topspin, half were backspin. Everything's very clearly like clustered together. She's got a little bit of horizontal run here. Everything is topspin with some break around this, anywhere from like 2 to 6 inches. And that's pretty consistent as she threw, 10 to 12 fastballs here. And so every one of those pitchers really showed something a little bit different. And that's important. Why does that happen? Why does it seem as if like some pitchers have a different neutral than others? Well, because every single pitcher is coming to the table with different mobility, different movement capacity. Their bodies are able to get them into different positions than the pitcher next to them. And because of that, their arm slots in different places. And their just neutral arm slot really decides whether or not they have access to spin variability, or whether or not they really are kind of limited in what their spin can do. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of what that looks like. So here's a picture here. I'm just going to kind of stop her. And again, if you're just listening to audio only, I highly encourage you to look at the YouTube video. But this is a pitcher this is her neutral. She's throwing fastball here. And what you can see is she's got a lot of thoracic extension. She's in her layback position. She has good external rotation through the shoulder. Forearm is facing up. Almost the ball is almost facing like, she's palm up on the ball. She's in this fantastic layback position. So right away out of the gates, this pitcher came to us in her assessment, and right away, she was a drop ball pitcher. And I thought like, we are really missing the boat. Not only is she a pitcher that we saw about 50% of her fastballs had backspin, but this is her layback slot. I mean, she is absolutely set up for backspin based on this high speed. So I'll just kind of scroll through this. You can see the arm will unravel here. And again, the timing at which she unravels that arm will dictate whether or not, what her hand position is in. We'll get into this in episode 2 a little bit more, but whether or not she actually achieves backspin or topspin. But regardless, this could be her drop ball. This is her neutral arm slot. This could be her rise ball. This is her neutral arm slot. That's important to understand, is like, this is her neutral fastball. It's what she gets into. Let me show you a little bit of a different case here. I'm going to keep scrolling through. And so our second pitcher here, this is her fastball. You can see this arm slot is very different. This pitcher has totally different mechanics based on different movement capacity, different mobility. No two pitchers look identical. Their bodies give them different things. And it doesn't mean that everybody needs to have everything. It's just important for us to be able to assess right out of the gates, like before we even try to create change through training. What are we looking at? What does this athlete really have at her neutral, at her foundation? So in this particular video here, what we see is that this athlete's arm slot is much different than the athlete I just showed. She's more on the side of the ball. This particular athlete struggles a little bit more with trunk deceleration, and so her arm is sort of getting pulled out of a slot. Not a lot of external rotation in the shoulder. You can see like her palm is facing sideways. She's a lefty, so we're looking at her palm kind of facing the first base side. And this particular pitcher, everything that she threw, actually she had a ton of sink. Like, she threw a great drop ball, but everything had that spin direction because this is her neutral slot. She doesn't have access yet in the time being. She doesn't have access to anything else. So as she's coming through and that arm gets pulled, everything is going to put her behind the ball here for top spin. And not just because that's her neutral. So the reason why I really wanted to bring those videos up is because what's important is that I don't take this second athlete that is a little bit more like on the side of the ball here and say like, okay, the first pitch you're going to learn is a rise ball because, that's the hardest pitch to hit in softball pitching. So that's the one you're going to learn first. That pitch does not suit this pitcher. Right now, she doesn't have the arm slot for that pitch. When we measure her fastball, you can clearly see, we measure all of her pitches, you can clearly see that everything has top spin. This is what she's set up to do. Now, make no mistakes about it. As athletes are in training, both training from a strength and conditioning standpoint, from a pitching standpoint, their trunk's position, their mechanics will shift and change. Does this stuff start to shift with them? Absolutely. So we can see that athletes, they come in, maybe it's February of one year, and we see that like right now they only have access to topspin pitches. Let's really focus on good, drop ball. We'll work on velo, and then good drop ball, a good change of speed that, really plays off with that drop ball. That's great. First of all, depending on what that velo is and what that break is, that might be enough for that pitcher to really be successful throughout her career. If we don't think that's the case and we're like, okay, this athlete could really afford to grow something else in her pitch arsenal, then what we want to do first and foremost is make sure that she has the capability to do that. So we're going to start to work on, following her trunk and those changes in her patterns, watching how that trunk or that the arm slot, I should say, really changes because of those patterns, and seeing now if that is allowing some variability to come through, particularly in her neutral. So, kind of backing up here, what I would say is first and foremost, what we want to do is, again, go back to these two concepts. Let's look at an athlete's neutral fastball. Out of the gates, what is it showing us that she is capable of doing? Let's stop looking at pitch types as this concept of learning new skills or learning totally separate things. Instead, we've got one arm slot typically at our neutral. We've got one arm that we're throwing from. It's a matter of the timing at which it unravels, which is going to dictate if the ball spins one direction or not. So again, let's stop kind of thinking about pitch types as being separate from one another, but really all connected to this common thread of understanding what's the slot I start in and what's the timing at which I really rotate that arm down the whip to create different spin directions. So once we start to see that in a pitcher right away, what does she have access to? By looking at her arm slot, by then looking at what she's given us, again, when she's not trying to achieve break, but she's just throwing through that fastball. And then let's decide, what does this pitcher need? Sometimes, and I reiterated this, some pitchers, they don't need everything. They might have the velo to accomplish what they need, and then the break that they do have is sufficient. It's important to really see that. But as we're trying to expand pitch labels or pitch types within pitches, it is so important that it matches what they currently have the capability of doing. So what we would do at S2 Breakthrough is we would again assess that. Do we think that this pitcher has enough right now? If the answer is no, what do we think works for her? Maybe it is that she has a good enough slot, and if we're really attacking that trunk positioning, we're really helping her understand how to decelerate better. We feel like she can develop some backspin. So what we would do is we'd start to measure that for her. We'd get her at usually a lower intensity. We'd get the high-speed camera on her. We'd get Rapsodo going. We'd get her to basically really understand, here is how your arm has to unravel in order for a pitch to spin a certain way. So she would then be able to see it on Rapsodo, be able to really work on feel, be able to look at it on the camera, and start to develop a sense of control over, okay, when I unravel my arm like this becomes a drop ball. When I unravel my arm in this timing, this becomes a rise ball. Now, all of a sudden, this pitcher is starting to possess some control over that timing. So we maybe took a pitcher where, she had variability, but it was random, 50% up, 50% down. Now we're actually giving her the information, understand that. She's starting now to create some consistency. And as we're measuring her pitches, we see, when we ask her to do this, she's really able to understand how to unravel the arm appropriately to get her hand in position to create top spin versus back spin versus, whatever we're working for, bullet spin maybe. And then at that point, we start to see she's in control of this. In my mind, now we label those as such. When I can say to a pitcher, I need you to create backspin, and she understands how to manipulate her arm action to be able to hold back on carry segmentation and hold back on the arm unraveling. She can consistently control that. That's when it gets the label. So I think there's a couple parts to this. One, this sort of cookie cutter traditional approach to pitching where we are very clearly just sort of, deciding that these are the pitches you need. You learn them in this order. We've got to get rid of that. We have to understand that not everybody needs everything. Not everybody can have everything. When it comes to teaching pitches, we have to understand what even matches that pitcher's capabilities and what that means. Secondly, when it comes to really then labeling pitches, it's important to understand that labels mean nothing unless they actually do what we assume they do. So labels are nothing. You could say that all I do is throw a fastball. I unravel it at different times. I get it to dance in different ways. I get it to break and move in different ways, and I know how to control that. I'd rather a pitcher just tell me I've got one pitch, it's called a fastball, and I can do all of that, versus the pitcher who can label 6, 7 different things, but nothing actually, is different or changes about them. So the label comes once the understanding and the control, the consistency over that is really established. And I just think that is a really critical thing that we really have to, a critical concept and topic that we have to just keep discussing. We're in a new world. We have data. We have this ball flight data in our hands all the time. And maybe if you're a pitching coach that doesn't have access to some of that data, at least to be able to look into some of these resources and see like, okay, now I see that story, and maybe I can't fully see the spin direction of what she's doing, but I can take video. Even just iPhone videos are so awesome now. So maybe I can just take a behind the view video if I don't have high speed and really see what her arm slot's doing. That's probably going to give me a good indicator of what I think is going on. And then I can use my eye on spin. There's always ways for us to assess this. So I would just keep encouraging everyone to start to maybe challenge what we've traditionally done in the past. Just because that's what we've always done does not mean that's the best way to do it. I truly, truly believe that this concept of how we teach pitches is really kind of holding our pitchers back and instead not allowing them to really embrace themselves and what they have in the moment and so that they can really understand how to maximize themselves in the moment. So again, I wanted to really kick off this first episode talking about that concept. As we're moving forward in this series, we'll keep talking about what it even means, what we're really talking about when we're talking about, unraveling the arm and topspin versus backspin, everything from, how to grow different pitches. We're going to talk a lot about some pitch design concepts. So I thought kicking off this podcast right away, or this series right away, with the concept of what are pitch labels and why maybe are we doing it wrong would really be a great way to start. So really appreciate you joining today. Wanted to keep today's first episode short and sweet. If you're listening to audio only, try to go ahead and check us out on YouTube so that you can watch some of these visuals that I played here on video. We really, really appreciate you guys joining in today, and I can't wait to get rolling on next week's topic, which is really going to be about how we're actually generating one spin direction versus the next. So stay tuned. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I'd love to connect and hear your feedback. You can contact me directly at ashley@s2breakthrough.com. If you're listening, you can leave us a review, or if you're watching, go ahead and leave a comment below. Also, be sure to follow S2 Breakthrough on all of our social media channels and subscribe to Stream S2 to find all things player development. Until next time, quest on.